This is Telok Ayer, a district steeped in Singapore's past.
The first batch of fully working on this river are the Indian workers.
Where commerce and craftsmanship have woven together a tapestry of architectural wonders.
The minarets are exterior structure to tell people it's a mosque.
Telok Ayers are no ordinary stories.
So she was the only lady went to the auction. The last one to raise hand to put 80,000 was my mother.
Wow.
They are tales of fortunes made and lost.
They say, look, money lending is a bad thing. They feel that, they're like Ferox.
Of dreams and despair.
Bugis driver holding in his hand a cane with which he struck at them.
The Bugis people, they're known as pirates.
A gritty chronicle of survival and ambition.
My dad's entrepreneurship literally changed this entire street.
I'm Rizman Putra, painted man, thespian, rocker.
And I'm Nabilah Said, writer, journalist, and fellow theatre practitioner. We'll unravel the threads that connect business and architecture and get to know the many places and people who have come to shape this district. Every good project begins with research, so we're hitting the history books, focused on nuggets connected to the Telok Ayer district.
Wow, you have more than me.
Nice.
Well done.
But before our deep dive can begin, I have one fundamental question.
So, Nabilah, tell me, where is Telok Ayer?
I think that's a good question because I don't know also.
Okay.
But I consulted URA and there's actually boundaries for Telok Ayer.
Wow.
Let's see.
This
there,
is, yeah.
Cross Street, Upper Cross Street and Cross Street, right?
Okay.
So,
This whole stretch, huh?
The sub-district is bounded by South Bridge Road, Cross Street, Boon Tat Street, Stanley Street, McCallum Street, Amoy Street, Ann Siang Road, and Erskine Road.
both of my grandfathers were from India, right, the coastal area. And then I really think that they probably were on Telok Ayer Street at some point, maybe even in the Indian Muslim mosque.
After all, before it was Telok Ayer, it was just an area near the river. And after it became the port, everyone would have passed through Telok Ayer. But is Telok Ayer just Chinatown? Or is there more to it?
Our next stop leads us to the commercial lifeblood of the district, the Singapore River. And I'm off to find out more about the characters that once inhabited these areas.
While I'm going to find interesting spaces and places that have survived. The most interesting start for me is an old Indian Muslim mosque in the district because of my Indian heritage. The one thing that stands out and has stood the test of time are Al-Abra's minarets. The largest two are strongly associated with the mosque's recognizable facade. This is the manager, Muhammad Sulaiman Muhammad Arif, or Mr. Arif as he prefers. Alas, it was almost noon and my growling stomach nudged our chat towards more pressing matters.
Dosa, vada, idlis.
Is that more traditional than biryani?
Yeah, it is.
Finding out what is usually catered for worshippers was interesting, but we eventually got with the program.
So the minarets and domes are not a religious requirement. So basically the minarets are exterior structure to tell people it's a mosque.
Okay.
Because if you walk along our mosque in Telok Ayer Street, if you don't have a minarets, nobody is going to know it's a mosque.
Mr. Arif tells me Al Abrar doesn't have the traditional dome and that they've been worked into the design of the minarets. Can you spot them? Yep, they are the tiny round structures right at the top. Mr. Arif thinks this could be because only the front view of Al Abrar Mosque is visible, so the builders may have felt that the minarets alone are more than enough to identify it as a mosque. Also, the builders may have wanted to maintain the shophouse look to align the mosque with adjacent buildings.
What about the architectural history of this building?
It was not a big building.
This place?
This place. It was just a hut. 1855, they have only one floor. And then in 1986, they did a lot of renovation, major renovation as well. And then they add second floor. So now we have a capacity of about 500 people can actually pray at one point in time.
Inside is an eclectic mix. Coloured glass panels adorn large French louvered windows, and its interior is held up by Doric columns. This fusion of East and West was brought by the first Indian Muslims who came to Singapore in the 1820s. These builders, patrons, and subsequent worshippers at the mosque were South Indians from the Coromandel coast. It included territories like Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Andhra Pradesh, and was colonized first by the Dutch, then by the British. Later on, the Malay Muslims also began to worship at Al Abrar. The mosque has stood here for almost 200 years since it was first built in 1850.
For the community, has it evolved?
We can divide the day into two. The daytime, normally Malay Muslims will worship, meaning they're walking around here. You know, the Tamil Muslims meet up to have a social gathering and so on. So they meet up in the evening after work. And then also we have a good diverse mixture of people among expats. So they pray here during daytime, during office hours.
Because it's considered in the CBD area,
CBD,
right? So
yeah.
you get that difference in communities that come here.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I didn't think that mosque got shift also, morning shift, night shift.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Meanwhile, while Nabilah's been on a spiritual path, I'm following my nose, literally, on a sensory trail to the river.
I want to know what the river was like back in the day. So I'm seeking out an expert who can paint me a picture of its history, the sights, the sounds, and the smells.
One name keeps coming up in all our research of the Singapore River, Lee Kok Leong, who grew up right here on its banks. Mr. Lee tells me he lived with family less than 50 meters from Coleman Bridge on the third floor of a shop house till he was 19.
Amazing, such a nice neighborhood.
Where would immigrants have first landed in Singapore?
Our earlier batch of immigrants, they actually landed along Telok Ayer Street. Beside Telok Ayer Street was actually beaches, but in later years it was reclaimed, become what we see today, right? So sometime in 1850s, Johnston's Pier was constructed. So that's where, at that time, people were actually landed at Johnston's Piers.
Okay.
Where's Johnston's Pier? It's just opposite Fullerton Hotel.
Johnston's Pier, the first landing point of Singapore in 1856, was called Lampu Merah in Malay and Ang Teng in Hokkien, or Red Lantern, after the red maritime lamp at the end of the pier. 2 years later, a seawall from Johnston's Pier to the old Telok Ayer fish market was built, and everything beyond a commercial square was reclaimed.
What was the community like? Did they live here and work at the same time, or?
So it had to trace back to 1840s. But if we look at those very first photographs in the 1840s, along the Singapore River here, we see many warehouses already erected. And of course, there were shop houses around as well. So we can find provision shops, medical halls, very important for Chinese. Later years, you see street hawkers, you name it, you have it.
Before dawn, coolies would gather around the riverside sipping on cups of coffee, some laced with opium. Their shouts while they worked would then echo across the river from daybreak to dusk. Kok Leong paints such a vivid picture of a vibrant life on the river. And many believe this prosperity in Telok Ayer is owed, in part, to some good feng shui.
So we are standing here, is that right? Somewhere here?
Yes. This is where we call belly of the carp, or I call it tummy of the laughing Buddha.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I did indeed choose this spot on purpose. The river's full shape here inspires its auspicious name as carps symbolize perseverance in Chinese culture. Which figures, since river work was first dominated by the Chinese community. Right?
I think many people will think that it's Chinese people. I beg to differ. So the first batch of coolie working on this river are the Indian workers. These Indians boatmen, they came from India together with Stamford Raffles. They built the first small tongkang. We call it Indian tongkang.
Surprisingly, Chulia, or Indian Muslim lightermen, worked on the river first in their tongkangs, influenced by the Arabian dhow with a sharp bow, deep V-shaped keel, and long and narrow hull. If you are as old as I am, you'd have seen these almost daily on our $2 notes back in the 90s. From around the mid-1800s, the smaller tuakaos, also pictured on our old $5 notes, were operated by the Chinese when they took over the river as they flooded in due to the Opium War. Once a Chinese immigrant got off the boat, his credit ticket would be transferred from a coolie agent to a local employer. He then had to work for his employer till his debt was paid. That meant 3 long years or more if the coolie fell ill, got addicted to opium, or incurred more debt. Many died indentured. If you ask me, that sounds like its own form of slavery. Speaking of which, Nabilah's got something to show me. Well, Munshi Abdullah wrote an account of slavery in Singapore in the Hikayat Abdullah, published in 1849. It's one of the most venerated yet debated accounts of Singapore's history. Because while the man tended to embellish, many still feel it remains one of the most definitive accounts of Singapore's past.
Munshi gets right into it in his chapter on slavery.
The Bugis came to Singapore. I saw 50 or 60 slaves, male and female, being led by a Bugis man around the tongue.
Munshi continues, and one disturbing line reveals that he observed that the young girls who were much run after by the buyers had only a little cloth given to them to hide their shame.
I wonder who is the Bugis man? And why is it like by a Bugis driver, holding in his hand a cane with which he struck at them here, there, and everywhere? Quite violent also.
From my limited knowledge of the Bugis people, they're known as pirates.
He would have been a seafarer from the southern Celebes or today's Indonesian island of Sulawesi, traveling on his distinctive boat known as a peraus. He would have traded cotton, salt, and salted fish for goods such as opium. From the 19th century up to the early 20th century, the Bugis men may have also brought shiploads of slaves, who were mainly other Bugis, to be sold in Singapore and other parts of the Malay archipelago.
Slavery was banned in 1824 and markets were closed down. I'd imagine that before that, they would have looked something like this painting of a slave trader in Timor with his goods.
We went from this, humans sold next to cabbages or spices, to today's shiny commercial hub that we know. There is a lot about Telok Ayer we don't know.
Okay, you can see, right? This is the Fullerton. The shoreline used to be somewhere here. It's crazy, right?
So all
All of this are all reclaimed. Amazing.
Amazing.
Rizman and I began our careers as young artists, rehearsing for hours in the now demolished Telok Ayer Performing Arts Centre, or TAPAC as we lovingly called it. So we have a special connection to the place, and we're back to understand the district a little better. I started exploring religious buildings because both my grandfathers were Indian Muslim and may have worshipped here in Telok Ayer. But it's got me wondering about places of worship for other religions. Are there others just as old as Al-Abrar? I find myself at another iconic site, the Sri Mariamman Temple. Chinatown's well-known Pagoda Street got its name because of the Gopuram, or Grand Entrance Tower, of Singapore's oldest and largest Hindu temple. The Indian engineer who built it actually came on the same ship as Sir Stamford Raffles to Singapore in 1819. The sculptures on top of the entrance tower are smaller than those below, making the tower look bigger than it really is. Like the other places of worship, the Yue Hai Ching Temple was a wooden structure near the port for Teochew immigrants to give thanks to the sea goddess Matsu. It's also known for its architecture, featuring 3D frescoes and ceramic figures. So the name Yue Hai Ching actually references the prayer for a safe voyage. So it makes me think about the different communities that used to come to Telok Ayer and how these different places of worship are testament, right, to the kind of hopes and dreams of the immigrants of that time. Nowhere else would Singapore's multiculturalism be more obvious than Telok Ayer, where you see different faiths coexisting peacefully side by side.
We are regrouping to unpack what we've learned.
I found a painting by Percy Carpenter that shows what the area looked like in the 1800s. And oh look, there's Al-Abrar Mosque.
I can't see.
Oh, you can't see?
Yeah.
You need help, is it?
Of course.
Okay.
I have a special device. Hey, wow. Look at that.
Wow. Yeah, there it is.
Focus, focus.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this is how it looks like in the 1820s. Still an icon of the area.
Hey, hey, hey. I'm amazed about the... Hey, hello. Okay.
Okay.
On the board.
One thing I took away was how much our shoreline in Telok Ayer has shifted
Okay.
outwards.
Okay, you can see, right? This is the Fullerton. So, the shoreline used to be somewhere here.
Wow.
Yeah. It's crazy, right?
So all
All of this are all reclaimed. Amazing.
Amazing. So far, I've been focusing on all the places of worship, right? And that's really interesting. But I was also thinking about the architecture of the space.
Right.
Like, you know, the shop house, right? The iconic shop house.
The Shop House, one of Singapore's key monuments. Based on drawings from URA, I've discovered there are different types of shop houses in Singapore. First, the early shop house. It's squat with 1 or 2 windows. Next, the transitional shophouse usually has 3 levels and a more decorated facade. The late or Baroque shophouse comes next with spectacular and extravagant facades. Then the Art Deco shophouse, adorned with classical motifs and a plaque with the building's date of construction. But something has been bugging me. Their heights change, but why are their widths always constant? Well, shophouses are influenced by southern Chinese architecture, and they had a practice of taxing buildings based on their widths. Back in the day, people would build their houses as narrow but as deep and as high as possible, influencing the form our shophouses take. Our shophouses are such an eclectic architectural mess. But they're our architectural mess, and I think they're amazing.
Hey Kai, I made this shophouse. What do you think? I'm like a child needing validation from my parent.
I'm with local architect Kai Sharom.
What is the shophouse to our Singapore history, or even today, the relevance to today?
The shophouse has transcended its definition. It has become more than just a shop and a house fused together. It has evolved to become a building typology that is transformative, that is highly adaptable. But more importantly, it has become part of our heritage. It has become part of our streetscape.
Do you think that's what makes it iconic? Is it iconic to you?
For sure. And I think it's more iconic because the shophouse is the glue to our culture. If you look at all 3 very different historic districts like Kampung Glam, Little India, and Chinatown, the shophouse is the constant common building typology that you find in all 3. But in each of the historic districts, you find different flavors and characters. So I think that makes it even more important as part of our heritage.
Wow. You sound like you love shophouses.
Oh, of course. I love shop. My office is in the shophouse, you know. So
yeah.
Yes, I think it is highly adaptable. And because of the simple principle that the shophouses, most of the shophouses are columnless, it frees up the mind. It allows for interpretation and reimagination of the space.
The shophouse is echoed everywhere in our built environment, but no more than here in Telok Ayer. The district boasts not only some of the oldest, but also the most diverse range of shophouse types in Singapore. But before it became an icon, it housed thousands of businesses and their proprietors, many of which were bankrolled by a certain community of moneylenders.
I've been trying to understand how Telok Ayer became the commercial hub it is today. The Singapore Stock Exchange is literally on the fringe of the district, and it's no coincidence. Telok Ayer's present-day link with money dates back centuries. Walk along this very street back in the day, and you might come across the Chettiars, the South Indian moneylenders who were vital in financing the small business owners of Telok Ayer. These men served small businesses when big international banks catered to commercial trading houses. Their world was cloistered and steeped in strict routine. Gambling wasn't allowed. Meetings with women, forbidden. There were a mix of single and married men with families, sometimes related, that traveled to Singapore together to join the business. There was even a cook and laundryman attached to the kitangis, which were the shop houses their officers were housed in. During its heyday, Market Street had 7 kitangis, which housed some 300 to 400 Chettiar firms. Today, the shop houses are gone, and the street is instead overshadowed by towering CBD buildings.
Like the person who recommend, do they get commission? No.
No.
No commission at all.
Today, I'm not in Market Street. I'm at 1 Tang Road to explore the last remaining Kitangi in Singapore. It remains in its original state and serves as a repository of some of the last remaining Chettiar artifacts in Singapore.
Were there anyone who ran away with the money?
A lot.
A lot?
Yeah.
So what do you do then?
So typically the business model is 30%. Before even we start, we know there's a default rate around 30%.
Right.
So this is part of our, it's a write-down that we already are prepared to lose.
Here we only take a promissory note, no, nothing else, not even a third-party guarantee.
A promissory note is a signed agreement from a borrower to pay a stated sum back to a lender on a certain date or on demand.
So this is a typical account book for a specific individual. So this has the person's detail and all, and this is their loan accounts. So this is how we typically keep track of each individual person's loan payments, the amounts that they've borrowed. This is, I think, what you were saying, the simple IOU. So this is what they just signed, and this is basically what we use as a contract.
A slip of paper, no matter how detailed, is very little insurance, in my opinion. But I learned the Chettiars had very foolproof way of safeguarding their interest.
And I think a lot of times you would see that most of the moneylenders, they know how to judge a person.
Wow.
Yeah.
And they also have got a network amongst the different firms. If they hear something, they'll tell them, look, hey, watch out for this guy. Something's wrong.
So you feel the energy of that person?
Yeah.
We never had many defaults with the businesses. The defaults usually come from the lower group. They borrow mainly for, splashing around and all those things.
Right.
In fact, it was safe to lend to businesses. So a lot of the Chinatown Tauke's, they used to come and borrow. I mean, you ask me who, honestly, I can't tell you who they are now, but as you can see them, those days, along Telok Ayer Street, China Street, all those places, you see all their big cars and all those things on all the wholesalers. A lot of them, they come down. If I say some names, you'll be surprised. I don't want to say those names. Okay, they have also come there. They've sat in places like this to borrow.
As recently as the 1970s, the Chettiar started to lose ground to local banks. The entire ecosystem vanished in 1977 when the area was redeveloped into the Golden Shoe complex.
Are there still modern-day Chettiars, or are they still in the money lending business?
The elder generation, which was involved in it very actively, most of them have gone back to India, or they've passed on. And the children are more or less, they're all quite educated. They are into more professional things nowadays. They say, look, money lending is a bad thing. They feel that, we're like Sherlocks.
For those of you not versed in the likes of Shakespeare, Shylock was a relentless, revengeful moneylender in the play The Merchant of Venice.
While Rizman has been learning about the Chettiars, I've been taken with the architecture of these old businesses. The shapes, the designs, the motifs. And I want to head out and find out more. This is the more than 150-year-old former Tong Chai Medical Institution. It was founded in 1867 by 7 Chinese immigrant merchants and served the poor immigrants of Telok Ayer for free. Interestingly, the function of the institution has somewhat come full circle, back to housing a private business that supplies health supplements.
So the Cantonese call this Chok Tong Mok, or bamboo house, literally because the building is long and skinny.
Not because there's bamboo. No,
Not just yeah.
Wan Pao Trin was one of the National Heritage Board's conservation specialists tasked with restoring and preserving the site.
Actually, what's the history of this place?
So this building is the former Tong Chai Medical Institution, and it was built and opened in 1892. It is built as a traditional Chinese medicine clinic. On the front, we have the entrance hall. So this is where patients and visitors will come in and gather and wait for their turn to see the doctor or the sensei during that time. And then the middle hall, which is the main hall, is where the consultations happen. This is where the sensei will consult with the patients and all that. And then the rear building is being used more of a back-of-house function. So, for example, the courtyard that we are in here is where they would dry the traditional Chinese herbs to be prepared to be prescribed for the patients later on.
A number of original artifacts remain in the building from when it was built. They serve as a reminder of what Telok Ayer residents might have spent hours staring at while waiting for treatment in the past. An interesting one is a carved wooden panel featuring tools that 8 legendary immortals from Chinese mythology would use. These are revered by the Taoists and are also a popular element in secular Chinese culture. Seeing all this gives me a sense of what this place and other spaces in Telok Ayer in general might have felt like in the past.
So I think the surprising thing about today was the fact that I got reminded of certain pop cultural references. So some of the architectural features actually reminded me of some buildings that were in the movie Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. So that was kind of fun.
Meanwhile, our little chat inspired me to dig deeper into the history of the medical trade in Telok Ayer, back at our HQ. Created in 1928 by LKF Medical's founder, Mr. Leong Yun Chi, X brand was conceived after a chance meeting between Mr. Leong and a German physician called Dr. Schmeidler.
The pair hit it off, and the physician shared a secret with a young immigrant: his recipe for a medicated oil to cure all kinds of discomfort.
This special recipe contained a mixture of camphor, menthol, mineral oil, as well as eucalyptus, lavender, and wintergreen. Back in the day, Leong, using this recipe, established X brand Universal Oil in South Bridge Road in 1928, just on the fringe of the Telok Ayer district. At first, the efficacy of the oil was not recognized, and founder Leong Yun Chi dove into marketing his new product.
Mr. Leong named it X brand because almost every household in Singapore at the time had an axe to chop firewood.
He then had illustrators and graphic designers help him craft an iconic visual identity, the axe motif and their distinctive blue and green packaging. To further promote X oil, Mr. Leong would distribute pamphlets with famous stories on one side and X oil advertisements on the other. He had sales girls, all dressed in eye-catching uniforms, promote the product.
In the 1960s, Mr. Leong began exporting his product to Indonesia, adding a third market beyond Singapore and Malaysia.
From the 1950s, Singapore was a Hajj hub where many pilgrims stopped over on the way to Mecca. Plagued with headaches, giddiness, and insect bites, pilgrims sought out the relief X-medicated oil brought, and sales began to increase. As popularity of X brand grew in Southeast Asia, it spread amongst pilgrims from the Middle East as well. This revelation has me hot on the trail of unassuming small businesses that went on to completely reshape the identity of Telok Ayer. I'm exploring little-known facts about businesses in Telok Ayer that were started to serve an urgent need in the community. As early as 1860, the Germans had a presence in medicine and pharmacy in Singapore. During the 1800s, many Europeans, Germans included, were venturing into Asia for reasons like trade, colonization, and missionary work. From August 1874, adverts by Dr. C.H. Trebbing, a former army doctor, promoting his practice, appeared in local newspapers. The ads show he had found some success.
By the end of the late 1870s, his practice had expanded from a single room in the Europe Hotel to a standalone building on Battery Road called the Medical Hall.
It was set up in a building called Red House. Dr. Trebbing died a decade later, and other German practitioners took over the medical hall. Other clinics, such as the medical office, also opened in 1892 on the corner of North Bridge Road and Bras Basah Road. There was a whole medical ecosystem run by German physicians in the area. But many German firms were later forced by the British authorities to shut at the advent of World War I in 1914, and that was the end of an era.
Other businesses catering to the needs of the community in the area still survived, some even to this day.
If ever there was a title of the richest street in Singapore, South Bridge Road would have been the likely winner back in its heyday. From colonial Singapore to the late 1990s, the street was lined with goldsmiths. On Cheong is one of Singapore's oldest, established in 1936, and now at number 251, after relocating from number 454.
Those days, you can employ people below 12 years old.
Wow. Hey, that's crazy.
Mr. Ho's father, Ho Yu Ping, started the company when he migrated from Guangdong in China. He passed away when Mr. Ho was 9, leaving someone else to take up the reins.
My mother is on the photo, and you can see it's a very tiny little lady, but actually very strong in character. Right. She was like shouldering not only the family burden, but also the family business. And 1 year after my father passed away, there was an auction of shophouses. And there's a row of shophouses, as On Cheong being one of the units. So she was the only lady went to the auction. The bid started at $40,000, all the way to almost like $79,000. And the last one to raise hand to put $80,000 was my mother. Wow. So my mother had the foresight, no educational background, but then a determination, and also the tenacity to bid for a shop house. And she secured this one, and now we are standing on this building.
Amazing. What was the business model like?
People used to buy gold and silver for safekeeping. Okay. And I believe that during those days, the jewelry, there's no such thing called design. Oh. So it's basically a very simple chain where the weight of the gold is more important than the design.
Jewelry was seen more as an investment and for savings. People didn't really consider design so long as they were getting gold. It was much like commodities trading that happens in the SGX today. And it makes sense, considering the clientele.
In Chinatown area, you can see many of the Samsui women. They are actually working as construction helpers. These people, usually they are laborers, and they're very hardworking. They accumulated the money, and then they send back to the hometown China. And also, there's a red light area in Telok Street.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So we have many of the women also came to purchase jewelry. And also, because of the Indian temple, many of the Indian customers also are regular customers.
What kind of customers do you have now?
It's quite a difference from those years. Younger generations, they are no more looking for only gold or even the precious gemstones. They are looking for special design where they can set and also to keep the value and for the loved ones.
So now you have designers?
Yes, we have in-house designers, about 5 to 6 in-house designers.
On Cheong has remained in sync with the evolving taste of Telok Ayer's, and I dare say Singapore's. rapidly changing demographic. Another major establishment that stayed more than relevant till this day is Sia Huat, maker of household goods and kitchenware. On number 7 to number 11, Temple Street.
Just now while you're talking, I got something to say then now.
So we discuss first, okay?
It's now a family business run by Mr. Tan's 3 children, Grace, Lynette, and Melvin. The shop has been here since it was first founded over 6 decades ago, in 1959.
We started off at number 9, single story. Then over the years, we managed to buy over the unit next door at number 11 first, I believe. And then subsequently, we bought over number 7. Yeah, and today we have become 3 units, 3 stories.
Founded by Mr. Tan Cha Sia, Chop Sia Huat started out as a household goods retailer catering to the needs of housewives in Singapore's Chinatown district. The name later shortened to Sia Huat is a mix of founder Tan Cha Sia's name and Huat, or prosper, which was typically added in Chinese businesses' names in the past.
From a mere retailer, the next thing we stepped into was to become a wholesaler as well. Even to sell to other retailers or distributors like us. And subsequently, we evolved into one of the major hotel restaurant supplier in all sorts of things that you see in F&B establishment, hospitalities.
My dad's entrepreneurship in identifying what the market needs literally changed this entire street from selling household tools into becoming F&B professionals, F&B industry street. A lot of the neighbors also started to transition when they saw this, and that's how this whole street became the competitive nature that it is today, actually. I think this street now has its own identity, so we all fulfill the needs of the F&B industry in Singapore. I don't think we can move out of this because we are now intricately linked with the street name really. So what we try to do is to just expand online, expand across the region, but we keep this a heritage shop at that.
Over the last many decades, our customers have become increasingly more informed. When we explored this online business, one of the things that we definitely want to keep growing is expanding of obviously the product selection.
This is where my mom, aunts, and grandmother used to buy their pots and pans when I was a little boy. Even now, maybe. What struck me the most is how Sia Huat has managed to stay relevant after all these years, and how they have evolved the way Telok Ayer has evolved.
I think what I learned from the businesses, I think the role of family is very important. And family, I'm not talking about just family in a shop, but I think family as the whole area. I think everyone is kind of like interconnected with each other. I think that's very special for Telok Ayer.
Our journey has taken us through the many faces and places of Telok Ayer. We have the dark past of slave traders, plying their trade alongside the toiling river workers.
Both juxtaposed against the bright light of religious monuments erected to give thanks. The shophouse, the wire frame upon which all the later establishments and businesses mentioned were built.
The austere and rigid lifestyles of the Chettiars
that funded the multifaceted businesses and services around them.
And the small businesses that seized opportunities that sprang up from this lush commercial environment.
Right now, if I were to go back and walk around Telok Ayer, it would be a very
a special place as compared to like when I was younger, walking through without understanding the history of it. I think there's a deeper meaning, so I can understand fully the soul of the place. Yeah. What about you, Nabilah?
When I was first thinking about Telok Ayer, right, I thought it was just about the Chinese community.
Right.
And honestly, the idea of one place being tied to just one race and one community doesn't really make sense because of the kind of people who came through Singapore back then. It was just a mix of people, and Telok Ayer kind of is that, you know, it kind of lives and breathes diversity from back then till today.